So wonderful to see you, Your Holiness. I hope you're feeling well and all is good. We miss you. We miss seeing you in person.
Thank you. Thank you.
Your Holiness, it's been 20 years since our meeting in Dharamsala on destructive emotions. And that was a meeting that we feel changed the field of science in which we work. And you gave us many inspiring suggestions, and you requested certain kinds of investigation. And there has been much progress over the last 20 years. Before that time, Your Holiness, there was no investigation of the effects of mind training on emotion. And today, there are literally hundreds of scientific studies that have been focused on the effects of mind training on different aspects of emotion. And we can trace that to this Mind and Life meeting in 2000 in Dharamsala. And yet there's still so much we don't know, as you often remind us, Your Holiness, when it comes to Western psychology and neuroscience, our understanding of the mind is very small. So we have many questions. And tonight we, Dan and I, will ask a minimum of 8 questions. So we request for you to please, if you can, answer these questions so we can get through at least the first 8 questions in the time we have. So I will begin this evening and ask Your Holiness, in Western psychology and in neuroscience, we use the term well-being, which means genuine happiness. Genuine happiness has been described in different ways, although there is a lack of agreement on what the key factors are that make up genuine happiness. And so the question that we have is, Your Holiness, what are the key elements of genuine happiness?
Happiness, very much so related with our emotion, part of emotion. So the emotion, there are many causes. Although environment, external things also affect, but mainly our own mental state. Mental state, calm, peace, the surrounding difficult sort of situation doesn't matter, not much disturb. So mind is very, very important. And then one good thing is mind can train. Through training, those destructive emotion try to reduce. Constructive emotion can increase. I think from the, maybe it's my sort of view, is some also the influence of Buddhist psychology, but in some extent, my own experience, the positive emotion, very much based on reason. Negative emotion, just emotion, no reason. So long run, you see, through training, you see, our mind emotion can change. All those destructive emotion can reduce. Finally, can eliminate the positive emotion, such as the Sanskrit word karuna, compassion. You see, we can develop infinite way. So therefore, through training of mind, all the destructive emotion can reduce, eventually can eliminate. The positive emotion can increase. So now question is, world. Now, I don't like to touch the other galaxies. Only this planet now, and also this generation and the future generation. The past is past. So now, unfortunately, 7 billion human beings, everyone want happy life. Yet, a lot of problem. These problems, some like the global warming and climate sort of difficulties, that is something beyond our control. No direct control. Beside that, too much sort of destructive emotion, anger, jealousy, fear. So these, you see, we can reduce, certainly, through training of mind. So now here we have to think deeper level. Most destructive emotion, as I mentioned earlier, self-centered, I. Another thing, things appears something objectively, independently exist. These two things. So through training, we can reduce self-centered I. Definitely. Then, through sort of, now here mainly Buddhist philosophy, particularly the Madhyamika philosophy, you see, the Prasangika particularly, nothing exists as appears. Now this quantum physics, some quantum physicists also, you see, have that kind of view. So now we have, you see, one way try to increase altruism. One, since negative emotion very much based on appearances. So, you see, through philosophical view, nothing exists as appears. So these two, also the thinking, certainly, you see, can reduce destructive emotion.
Beautiful. Thank
Although,
Your
you see,
Holiness.
as a Buddhist monk, it is not right to say, I have something. but the reality, in daily my practice, as soon as I wake up, now, today Jimbala, today Jimbala. 셔가야 라보다가 랑신 되네 접주실 전주선을 기버기사 전주선 상주시던 게 제상가 랑든 좀나야 전주선을 하가면도 샹드 주나야 자주스는 하가면도 가담 고마도 송원나신 장주스음 아니 애기 미지스트 스티조나 소장 코랑 거서 딕디장 코랑 정선에 남주 숨고도가 디페지 뭐는 라늘이셔 장주스음 삼당 대인다리 디지 삼당이요래 쇼가 라보다가 시 심지슬랑 엔데네 던주 당기요래 다데네 아책 즈버들이야 다 우문주고 지디 년다를 신게 된대기 아니 가서 개들랑게 생이 땡주나 텔을 꾸려 ngo부집에 칠 돈이 ngo부집에 교교나 된지심이 뒤신 거예요. kanshir ngobo deda namchana tinyi dakzen ngole tsurudu nanyi mayi tishin chikdengi tanyajala nabar chamicha. Tinyi kapsu rikbo kanshi ki dada chanda kyawa rimba rikdi tanya tanya rimba chiki kyawa kanka yinban kyoro. Dawana yawmar beslavna ngobo tongbo sungnya lasa wo chola dana marabaya min chida tenya sungnya sodon le shiba teyen naba kikyudar tishin ngobo tamcha tongna 돈이 달라 루도 야원 유사하게 쇼로가 지우디 니다르시 된데기요래 삼단기 사다 되기 아테게 ዝ보고 때 숙충주도가 지금 그게 된지 은의 예배정 좀 난데 디 아테게 ዝ보되기 된지되기 차단지 요래 그 된지 숙충 다음에 그도 차단의 숙충도 돼야지 되는데 개봐도 내디 니다르시 삼단기요래.
When I wake up in the morning, every morning, the first thing that I do is to really reaffirm my generation of bodhicitta, awakening mind. And there is a passage that says that for the sake of fulfilling my own self-interest and interest of others, I shall generate the awakening, my altruistic awakening mind. And this important phrase of the fulfilling the interest of self and others is a crucial one. The great Kadamba masters of the past would say that as a practitioner, our focus and effort should be really single-pointed towards cultivating bodhicitta, the awakening mind. Once we have cultivated our awakening mind, the purification of negative karma, it will take care of itself. Accumulation of good karma, it will take care of itself. Our task is to simply focus on strengthening and cultivating bodhicitta. And this is really true because once you are able to cultivate your mind, expand your aspiration and include the interest of others within that aspiration, then it really opens up and reduces that grasping onto oneself, the ego-centeredness. Similarly, the other important practice that I bring is reflection on the truth of emptiness. And here the key text that I use are 4 stanzas from the 6th chapter of Chantakriti's Entering the Middle Way. There's an important section where Chantakriti really takes to task dismantling the construct that we generally tend to impose on our perception of the world, where we impose upon reality some kind of objective intrinsic existence. And there are 4 stanzas that Chantakriti brings, which really demonstrates powerfully that how that kind of assumption is unfounded. And the point of this particular contemplation is to really reduce the grasping onto something that is objectively real. Because as explained before, if we examine the way in which our emotions operate, many of the destructive emotions tend to be rooted on an assumption of something objectively really out there. And then the stronger our grasping to such projection, the stronger our negative reactions would be. So therefore, really bringing this awareness has the ability to free up that perspective so that we do not engage with the world with such an assumption of objective, intrinsic, and independent existing out there. And in these ways, it really helps, my own mind.
You're holy. 우문주글식 대달로도 세게 나와 세잖아. 랑게 라는 내베 규루 러신도 스숨되다 멀리 되네 게메발 또데스. 디그로지 응위여서도 또데 타냐 템베도기 고버로스. 따동 고버도 삼대 이미기 조금에 발라 닝지안 깨버지. 대공듯이 숨기상전은 멀리 번호로에 파버지 왕인스. 엔 디슈그 담디 그저더니 조양가 보 개교본 강배교 되네 교가 보이 눈두다네 개얼lunг 슈도기 개연의 자수 바로 초도 조스 띵가 저게 거다
So in the same text, Chandrakirti's text, he talks about how once you deepen your awareness and understanding of emptiness, it really opens up a new perspective on the way in which you will experience and engage with the world. And here he talks about how our perspective and the understanding of the conventional reality will be combined with our awareness and understanding of the ultimate empty nature of everything. And in this way, the conventional truth and ultimate truth will be like two wings. The wisdom of the two truths will be two wings, which will then propel you to traverse the space to reach to the Buddhahood. And this is really beautiful. And His Holiness was saying that, I'm someone who's at least making an attempt and saying that that's the journey I would like to make.
다데네 대안다 destructive emotion 공주차네 디체 다 란신신기 양배 소소사시부시 시니 디양 차단해야지 연구여부 인도산에 다 데려야 준주그 러지디디 약슈르샤 다 준주가 한다 세디 강서다다 셴이가 대원들도 중보了가서 다다 차브르 지유는 근시 셴미 다송시 시네 소소지고 삼단돼야지 다 되게 뭐네 평균열었으나 다들 생기 동에다 양다 저걸 맞잖아 상예유도 미루죠 코나야 대화 메시지 덤버 된자르다 소소지고 지 삼단이 다게 대화 장자 삼다 생기 대화를 선마다시 대배에는 다들 생기 동에다 아니 가서 다시 뭐니 섬지나 아니 야지 살랑고 떡고 지좀 해봐도 아장장한데 채시 지기 나란주 미스다게 나는 샤샤네 점물이 디간 샤샤네 다대신이 동에다 야다 저거 마셔서 산이도 미루지 코하나야 대와 매 사디 템버 땡자르샤 점물이 녀도 상말로 란시브는지 그다음 셴 야고를 도야다 되게 용되기도가 사디리 인도 가다이니 셴 집은지야 다디 뭐냐 전에 그게 최소 계셔라 간다 지속 나로로 뭐냐 전에 그 시디 행사 디기라야 다 간다 다디신 동에다 야다 저 마찬가 아니 배 동에 삼마시면야지다 다 상월로 심지어 탐절로 년도 동야지게 로도 장배이나 다 내야는 뉴스야 되리 점물리기 미삼월로 동에 면도부터 대원도 직규리스 사진의 인도 가서 삼월로 미통주 등주수에 되듯이 삼월로 간다 대원대보다 동해 면도부 찍고 인도산에 다 현도 삼당 거래서네 내는 유셔야 돼. 다 전다 대토기요. 다 간다 아니 탑시 이도가 동력이 따와 되기 댄징가 아타긴 집어대 시당게 싸워 멍시시스네 디식 숙자 대네 랑진진 야 랑진지기 견다 셴진지기 견데 때네 아니 랑진지 숙충으로 동야지기 어다 탑시 니기 토네 간다 섬을 요 동야지기 내디 인자리 삼던 거래 냠리지기 요래 땐데 요티기
So we spoke about how to confront our tendency to grasp and project objective reality to things, which then give rise to our emotional reaction to the world. There's another prong to this approach, which is to now target our tendency for self-centeredness. And this is a different approach, but they are complementary and they need to be combined One is the wisdom approach. The other one is the compassion-based approach. So the compassion-based approach really requires opening up our assumptions about self and others' boundary. We tend to assume that I, as an individual self, is so different and distinct and separate from others. And a lot of our assumptions and our relationship with others is really based upon this idea of me, who's there at the core of I or core of me. And for the sake of protecting this, we tend to do a lot of stuff. And so this construct of self really has to be opened up through the practice of compassion. And here, the text that is most powerful is Shantideva's teaching, where he talks about, questions our normal attitude towards suffering. He says that, why is it that since when it comes to the fact that one wishes to be happy, do not want suffering, self and others are exactly the same, and why is it that we bother about taking care of our suffering and not of others? And then he goes further to say that, in fact, he says that if you examine carefully, many of the problems that we face ourselves are rooted in excessive self-centeredness. And many of the good things that we see in our life really are rooted in a perspective that includes others. It's other-centeredness. So he says that, therefore, if you are not able to make that kind of switch, exchanging of self and others is the technical term that he uses. He said, let alone attainment of Buddhahood, even in this life in samsara, there will be no joy. There will be no place for real joy. So, and that I truly believe is the case, because if we look at the world, many of the problems in the world is often rooted in excessive self-centeredness, ours, mine, and so on and so forth. And therefore, what is required is really opening up that kind of excessive tight gripping on one's own sense of self and mine and ours, and opening up and connecting with others and seeing more of yourself in others, so that there is a true understanding of the shared nature of self and others. And when this is one of the reasons why I often, advocate, not just from a religious Buddhist point of view, but in fact, from a more humanistic point of view, the sense of oneness of 7 billion human beings. Because when it comes to the fundamental disposition and fact of who we are as human beings, wishing to be happy, wanting to overcome suffering, there's no difference at all. And in fact, the more we are able to think about others, the more actually we lay the foundation for our own personal happiness. So I think this it's a two-pronged approach. So when you use these two-pronged approach, it truly has an impact. And that's why these two practices of compassion and emptiness is really an important part of my daily practice.
Of course,
it really seems to make a difference. Yeah.
Well, that is, I'm Buddhist practitioner. So for my daily practice like that, but then about human population here on this planet, you see, there are non-believers. For them, you see, some scientists say that we are social animal. So any social animal is some kind of, by nature, the society, the group is basis of your own life. So therefore, any social animal, some kind of sense of concern of their own group. So we human being, social animal, obviously, from birth, you see, our life entirely depends on mother's affection and family affection. So we all, by nature, since, you see, our own sort of also the life very much depend on your own group. So you have to take serious concern about the group which your life entirely depends. So this is nothing to do with religion. Then, as far as those religious believers, for example, Christians and Muslims and many other who believe God, then every sort of religion say God is infinite love. Nobody say God is angry, angry God, except some Tibetan deity is quite. That also, you see, also a lot of also complicated philosophical sort of explanation. Otherwise, you see, generally, I think the God is infinite love. So we all creation of that kind of God. So anyway, God is our Father. Our Father is infinite, full of loving kindness. So we are children of that kind of Father. So looking from that way, we should be more compassionate because our Father like infinite love. That also is useful. That's all major religious tradition is who believe Creator. So thinking deeper way, that also very powerful. You see, to keep more compassionate mind. Like that. Then, as I mentioned, already briefly mentioned, non-believer secular way, also as I mentioned earlier. You see, now, scientifically, we can say a lot of trouble is our emotion. So emotion very much related with extreme self-centered sort of view. So now, through education, on the basis of basic human nature, more compassionate, on that basis, now further sort of explanation or education about warm-heartedness in order to build happy world and live happily among the humanity, like that. So education, I feel, very important role. Compassion should not consider something religious thing. Is it related with the society, the humanity, like that? So, yes. Now,
thank you. Yes. Thank you for that beautiful teaching. My question is more basic. When you've used the term destructive emotions in what you've said, when we first had this meeting 20 years ago, you yourself requested specifically that we talk about destructive emotions. When psychologists think of what makes an emotion destructive, they say it's when it leads someone to harm themselves or another person. In the meeting, though, another standard came up. It was emotion was destructive when it distorts our perception or disturbs our peace of mind. Your Holiness, my question for you is, what do you think makes an emotion destructive?
Karsa.
Nyomon tala the destructive sage or never exchange sage. The nyomon destructive sage or destructive emotions never exchange nyomon sede. That's so what get the any never exchange higher the yula chinjulo to tongue chane sunguyore yula chinjulo to tonga and susu semgi he did the top of check tone gomba shegiyona yako nyong sorte ke on de gala ko chelele ya ani shala never che da rang never che chage yung yo ben za dan destructive said elia gomba kan shegiyona emotion
지사다 간다 미점도 마세베 속샤 튼두 순절로 지고 대원되어도 동해 민도 비슷하래 다 대화 영향이 시설이 지 군도 tumbuchen 돼야 돼 그도 튼두 수이네 뒤체되기 열어 봐 나서 밀차샤나 이께서 미네 많이 참종 그 돈은 로되기 열어 사진데 인도 디 겨 침이 계저다 지 가서 그게 지금 그거 군조 계속해 야말고 세콜라고 하는 친구이나 꼭 간단 거요 내술이야 나라도 등에 믿어봐도 대원대가 이번에 경제국과 개요 말이 참으로 랑강한 게 여러 들을 순절로 재상하다 뒤 나라도 지 나신 소소치고 삼단대도 삼로도 무수도 그러셔 서당人이 초약이 지소디 파도 삼단에 아니 삼도 고양고 쓰는 것도 자체로 다네 어다 도선 삼단베이나 땡아서 지단 거 로조 나로리아 추이 계속하게 매체 제 간다 아주 지소 된자 여대보다 디긴 데마지야리아 어다 참즈 거다 생다 띵아서 로스 나리아 도스 간다 간다 년놈주 디셔리게 지 리뷰 트레이딩 hygiene of physical 개심부rel라 데더 첩지 hygiene of emotion 샤 개심부다스 녜디셔디게
So the characterization of a particular state of mind as a destructive or constructive really has to be understood in relation to our basic disposition of a sentient creature. And it's not something just we human beings have, but all sentient beings have this natural, the drive to seek happiness and wanting to avoid suffering. So anything that leads to that is contrary to this disposition can be characterized as destructive in a broad sense. And when it comes to our disposition of wanting to be happy and not wanting to suffer, this is something that we don't have to logically prove. It's a fundamental fact of a sentient creature, not just us, even animals, and particularly this, social creatures. And we know, for example, like many of the more constructive states of mind are related to our social nature because they have to do with more, harmonious relationship with your social members of the social group. So in human relationship also, we see many of those states of mind that tend to be more constructive are the ones that promote that kind of relationship and social life. So that's one really way of talking about this. And this also reminds me of my wish when I talk about these things to really couch them more in secular terms, secular universal terms than religious or Buddhist, specifically Buddhist terms. And the importance of that is then we will develop a language that will be more universal, that can be brought into the school setting and education system. And I really feel that this emphasis on appreciating the social nature of human beings and what are the specific constructive states of mind and qualities that can be important for living a good social, happy life really should be introduced from a very small age so that they become part of an education curriculum. And I normally speak of emotional hygiene because everybody takes care of their physical health and physical hygiene. So something like emotional hygiene really needs to be brought into the school system, education system.
And umanjugbe tsigdi dum debuji yagodo gade the 공주 세베이나 에네 미둑 수수 체제 담번 멤버지 추도 스미 시베 남주 초시진 미수바의 뉴도 냥주 경어시 다 서버다 세베 시신 단계 연은 어저 세베 제신 겨우 담보라 팡다 로도 로미 시버라 캐번지 대오는 흐미지도 디버서 유사 다디 공주 pen don so the yaw sha sebi ne lung lan se do sebi ne zebu chune ma ba la sang su don zebu gu do wa de lung lan bi ne gamu ge ne di be chege jo shi bi tong de go ro da 저서 심을 시디체 별로지기 잠지체는 예배이나 그 정신의 동리야随便 제시 교우 담보를 자리 소용도가真的 간단 가서 common sense 상담이나 나랑도 수인의 그 지소 나로리야 미군을 즉 자오직다 그 군기 피게다 통나 줘야지 제외이나 다 随便냠리잖아 강에 또도 체디 그러고 강에 체비 그도로 随便냠리요나背后的话 현실 제우를 쉬우시 되게 어려데 콩로세지 되버 있는 개무스간에 체계차 사들이 인도 간다 이 우먼주고 지기디다 너처버리셔.
So, and also as part of this, education should really include bringing common sense in a very powerful way. And demonstrating how the destructive aspects of some of these emotions can manifest and destroy relationship. There's a beautiful lines in the same text that I was talking about by Chandrakirti, where Chandrakirti, in extolling the virtues of patience and forbearance, he gives the example of how when it's opposite, like anger and hatred takes over, how physical behavior and it changes. And he talks about how, when strong anger arises, even your face assumes an ugly demeanor. So even though you might have prepared yourself to go out and looking really good, but if you're angry, your angry face with the frown and everything makes you look ugly and unappealing. And even if you force yourself to smile when you are angry, the smile comes out as some form of a pretense or a sarcastic smile. So, and then of course, anger immediately destroys friendship and relationship and so on. And patience and forbearance sometimes may be more challenging because, sometimes adopting patience and forbearance involves putting up with certain hardships. But the payoff is really great because those who are able to bring patience and forbearance and, rooted in compassion, they have a greater sense of ease. They have more joy. They are more fun to be with. People like being around them. So those are really, common sense. Of course, Chandrakirti is talking in a Buddhist text, but these are really common sense. And these really need to be part of the secular education, promoting the values of these constructive emotions.
实际上，这我们这个这个控制处的罪名写的，那么就超级形式呢。控制单单心主者，就这个心主者的这个那个道理啊，刚才加工起来了呀，控制派去单单内容个有所说啊。但这我说的个，这心主个没别所说。当其实个这我熟悉也别说个心的习定啊，知道。 第sem 주고 매대지. 사들이 인도 변나 더샤 숙성부 체베이나 녀몽도 레디 이네 디sem 주야 데 패지 용요서래. 시단게 고sem 주야 자 숙셔도.
Another important fact that Chandrakirti brings out, which I forgot to translate earlier, and His Holiness is reminding me now, is how when anger arises, it really robs us of our ability to be discerning. So because it really takes away that, the sort of the cognitive ability to discern what is the right action to take in a given situation. And so what this suggests is among the various emotions, anger is the one that has the most destabilizing and disturbing effect. Attachment from the Buddhist point of view is seen as belonging to a more destructive qualitative emotion. But if you compare attachment to anger, attachment does not disturb us that much as anger does. Anger really shakes us from our equilibrium. So I think this fact of how anger robs us of our ability to be discerning is again an important attribute that needs to be reminded. We need to reflect upon. Yeah.
Yeah, these are extremely interesting and important issues for us to consider. And this notion that anger robs us of discernment is, I think, very important to bring to modern scientific investigation. And so this is extremely helpful, Your Holiness. I'd like to ask a question now that's a little different. There are programs that train people to act in a compassionate way. For example, training people to volunteer to tutor children in schools. There are programs like this in many different parts of the world. But these programs do not help to train the mind of these volunteers. There are other approaches that train the mind, but do not teach people to apply this training in the world. So my question is there a balance, a proper balance, a best balance between these approaches? Between an approach which trains people to act in a kind or compassionate way, like volunteering, but does not train their mind directly, and other programs which train people's mind, but do not necessarily teach them to apply this training in the everyday life.
So 들으셨 단데 laptop 칼이야 닝지다 참바다 주제되다 개치부 임버드 랍고 거와 랍에 될이야 안에 탑람다 마스네 두 스텝에나 카니 두스 탑람 찍디 아니 부구졸이야 당란체다 셴로 로봇체다 치 자외톨 제된 체제 셴뱅게 자외톨 제된 체네 랍닝 릭직 야 랍닝 릭직이 무엇을 자주단 자외톤의 셴뱅게 자와를 제된 마체버체 로장야게 즉 셴뱅 삼로다야다 아니 랑다 셴이 대화도 충분 삼로다야다 셴은 간다 너버 마제야다 그저 로장제 아니 닝지롭던 잠닝지롭던 대니지 칸이도스 이니부디 즉 간다 찍려야 나로 로려야 도나 마셔제 찍로장 도나 마지 찍대야 야 치죄배 돌에 셴뱅 자외 돌 도나 마셔디 다디 버룰이야 즉 차중으로 즉 탑시에 가려요나스 밸런스 야보용해야지 네가 고고요나 매나스 가려야가 요나스 탑람 가게 야가 요나스 시거리시
다 저런 거는 류가 이숨신 시기열이 다 류지 줘봐 컨디션다 컨디션다 나게 줘봐 컨디션이 자 심리야 투니 류가 이숨신소 일이做了 자상가 조조 3년 안에 지금 샴페인으로 예배이나 아니 나게 저람디에 샴페인 제딩에 지금 칭에 마약으로 드저리 매용지기 배측상 보셔야 지금 심 미심 구야지 아지 샤야 다 아니 저람디에 그저 투도 그것도 기회선에 샤나 판도치야 지기 자다 조조고 이르샤 류가 이승문한테 조 이르샤 지사다 안다 잠지사주 제 일 된다 어로다 지사 다디
so so in the Tibetan and Buddhist language we speak of the three doors of our action, the body, speech and mind. And these are the three avenues through which we interact and engage with the world. But out of these three, the most important one is really the mind. Because if we are able to transform the mind, if we are able to bring really a conviction in the value of compassion, empathy, concern for others, at the level of changing the mindset, of the child, then action of helping behavior, restraining from harmful words and harsh words, and trying to harm others, these restraints will come naturally. So I think that, so between the three, the speech, body, speech, and mind, the emphasis really has to be on the mind, on the mental level. And in any case, when we are talking about bringing the education of the heart, we are talking about the qualities of the heart. like loving kindness, empathy, affection, kindness, and so on. So here already we are talking about, qualities of the mind, and those qualities of the mind has to be cultivated with an approach that prioritizes a mental training.
둔두스 저기 깨자야 나로리야 작업 제 가소래 지 수수가 요즘에는 둔두 난자게야 집에는 차도 치우도 되게 양코를 깨 면자로 직자야지 진양금 늘리고 그들을 양 깨 면자로 지 여래디 미게 능신기 투부지 요말보다 세상가当然是미 얘네 나 가서를 보게 나 접었으면 또 가다 깨지대 배 투부실시니 세상가 지기 깨서 계수자 서로 지에니 지 가다베 책 호탈이야 지 책주게 매나야 야 된지 지 계수자 서로 되는 뭐지 그 민가게 축구실수가 제 아니 다은시다 류지처럼 배지다 꾸는도 만들어 지도 롱어된 게 지다 가서래 류지처럼 되는 연구들이 더그스게 패는 여대버지 배지 말에 다 조조 대가다 아니 이들이샤 저상가 아주 룡아 예수 채워나네 나기 다처럼 뒤에 캐시 류처럼 캐시보려라 아니 투서 되고도 나게 저람들이샤 다디 사모노 싸워도서디 예룰이야 투댕의지기 저서다 심리야 시디고야디 빼캐시보려샤 다디 나도 사모로리야 되게 쉬운 날씨리 정신이 탄지기 지기 상부연대지 예대버체 저와시 예대버체 단 연무전 이되면 기시 먹어체 지기는 서 저와지 다 배정하는 남주주단 미더 저와디 배질 연무던 데딩에 아대기 좀보던 데데지 배지래 안든지 배 가서래 차시 차와 계시 먹어진 지용기 지금 생애디 쉽지 개시 보이면지 대연에 나게 저런디 이동원 차지 아니 류지 저런디 이동원 차지 패지된듯이야.
So if we look at the three doors of our action, body, speech, and mind, at the level of body, of course, we can imagine or understand certain types of bodily action, which is completely neutral, morally neutral action. And that may not require even a conscious intention, something that just body kind of, a mechanical motion of the body. But compared to body, speech is way more sophisticated because human speech, if we compare to the speech of animals, the birds, they sing a lot, but we can see that, when there is a danger, there's, issue sounds that are particular kind. When they are trying to attract mates, they are issuing sounds in a particular way. So there are some variations which are important part of their life, but compared to human repertoire of speech, the animal's speech is actually quite limited. But humans have such rich repertoire of speech that even though if we are trying to hurt someone, even though we may not use harsh words and the words that we're using sound good, but we can say things in a way that really hurts someone in a sort of in an innuendo or some kind of implicit manner. So human speech is very sophisticated. So therefore, for practitioners particularly, paying attention to your speech, being mindful of your speech is considered very important because that is an important part of a social life. Now, compared to speech, the mind, the mental world is even more complicated and complex. And in any case, both speech and bodily action, both of them, those that matter, morally significant actions of speech as well as physical action really are coming from a state of mind, an intention or a motivation. So I think when we talk about bringing compassion and kindness in a school curriculum, I think the emphasis really has to be at the level of mind, intention, and motivation. So, for example, if we have the intention of compassion, then we will naturally choose words that is more constructive, that is more beneficial, that's less hurtful. So the intention and the motivation really defines the constructive or destructive nature of the action and of both speech and body.
This is really enormously informative, Your Holiness, and we, I think, need to pay more attention to combining mind training with action in the programs that have been developed in education in the West. And so that's very, very helpful. So thank you. Dan?
Yes, I'd add that, Your Holiness, in talking about an education of the heart, you've often made a what I think is an incisive critique, which is that modern education, secular education, focuses on the material world, but does very little with our inner minds, our inner life. And for example, compassion is missing from the curriculum. And if you think about emotional hygiene, which is a term that you've used, how that could apply, I have a question for you about anger. You included anger as a destructive emotion, but anger comes, I'm thinking of Gandhi or Martin Luther King. They're angry at social injustice, but they use their anger. Can you tell us about how we can have what you might call a constructive anger?
And the social injustice, 디 견상치알이야 지심부터네 견상치 도르고 공주께서만 배체 가다지 그게 차당 왕게 지 랭에 싸게 다 조베지 미리 드즈잘이야 세심기 다디 아니 차당 레드스 딱 가다 초리기 레드스 샤비는 야고야 말했으니 고 럽지샤기 되듯이 세심기 그냥 가서 한다 그냥 배워 차샤나 지금 가서데 지 별로 강해 싶지 책이 어려 연구 어려데 이네 세심디 마토르 제시도 스테디 여봐 제가 봐 견주 제베 그도 레 세심기 팬심부터네 지 견주시야 공주터네 견주시야 멤버체 디던데 야요 소스도
So this example of anger in the context of confronting injustice, societal injustice, but I would argue that actually one could confront these injustices quite effectively without anger, without resorting to anger, by using compassion. And also because many of the acts of injustice are really coming from a place of either ignorance or falling victim to destructive emotions or very discriminatory biased attitude on the part of the perpetrators, whose understanding of fellow human beings are lacking or wanting. So there's ample ground to really feel compassion for them. And also in some ways one could say that to save them from further consequences of creating destruction. So, for example, in the case of Tibetans, we are fully cognizant of the injustices that is taking place back home in Tibet. Yet at the same time, we are trying to carry a struggle where we strive to ensure that we never lose sight of the humanity of the other side, always remembering the humanity of the other side. And whatever criticism or whatever resistance we offer, it is being offered from a place of wanting to be helpful to both sides. So clearly, yes, anger can be a powerful motivating factor, but one can also bring compassion as a powerful lens and motivating factor in dealing with injustice.
Thank you.
Thank you. Your Holiness, models in psychology of genuine happiness often leave out morality, ethics. So my question is, what is the relationship between ethics and genuine happiness?
ethics에 가다 샹리야 판다야 샹은 너버 도미야디다 에티칸 리그로다 자상가 간다지 런이 초야디 샹의 땡과 차이르잖아 지제 심기 샹리야지 류기 다 너버차서로 나가 측주마야서 드즈자디 도미야디 고 간다이니 지 ethics에 들어왔다 디디 전다 디디 삼으로 지 간다 지 샹리야 그게 제 삼바지 여대와 디 간다 랑 균즈도 셰디 샹의 저와 쳤고야디 도 삼다나 용퇴하시도가.
So when we are talking about ethics, actually we are talking about, our relationship with others. And ethics, in a nutshell or in a very basic level, is an action that involves refraining from harming others and, if possible, being helpful to others. So that, in a sense, is the central question of ethics. So if we take our understanding of ethics to be that way, then we can see the connection with happiness, because as social creatures, if we engage in actions that are harmful to others, not only does it bring harm to other fellow human beings, but also it undermines the basis for one's own well-being, one's own happiness. Whereas if we are bringing a sense of understanding, empathy, and compassion for others, consideration of others' needs and well-being in our interaction and relationship with others, not only does it help others, but it also helps ourselves. So one could argue that you can use a self-referential argument, self-referential case to promote ethics from the perspective of personal well-being or personal happiness. So in this way, we can see a close connection between ethics, living an ethical life, and living a genuinely happy life.
패지 두 스텝이나 그래서 즉 destructive emotions 망체디 크두데 두 지기야 가서래 emotion디 라운드에서 뭐도 균진시라는 삼을게 매듭서지 다 positive emotions도 제디 균진 삼다는 또 슉슉슉슉 줘야지 뒤에 캐바시도.
So, and also one important distinction that we can appreciate between positive versus destructive emotions is that in the case of destructive emotions, generally they tend to be much more impulsive, instinctual, reactive. Something triggers, we react. And they are not really grounded in any considerate response, engagement with whatever the situation is. Whereas if you look at more positive and constructive emotions like compassion, empathy, and love, and so on, then although they may arise naturally, but in fact, we can see that they can be grounded in reason, understanding of reality, and then they can be strengthened. So they tend to go more in tune with reality, whereas destructive emotions tend to be more reactive, instinctual, and not much basis of consideration.
Thank you, Your Holiness.
Your Holiness, this brings to mind the work that Paul Ekman did on the Atlas of Emotions. I know you encouraged, actually, I think you even supported his work on mapping the full range of human emotion, the anger family, the sadness family, the joy family, and so on. Why do you think it might be helpful for us to understand the full range of human emotion? That's my question.
Terje tanda jangrum chi ngema tanda nga ju emotion ke tseri ba pola ju ba Paul Ekman pola deson ju ba Paul Ekman tanda tseri ba deson ju ba de Quran ge tanda diria jangrum chi ne ane kana andigalia tanda di jangrum chi ge tunyen ge charo na je ane emotion ke sabta soya language pe yorbas the map of the mind, map of emotion. These are done the emotion ke map tabata subject dabuchi and a musician the nega chimbu zie de gongba kawa shegunas. Map of the mind, map of emotion.
다 안다. 인지 시그널이야. 나 삼르 지글로이 지 캡을 뿌리 맨다 여버디디 패시 민시디 더금에 소스도가 사다 이모션사 직주디 다 몽구실에 배주 지여르디 다고 이모션 나란즈바나 루리 대베이나 그다 심중업 주서지신 뜻은 몽구 파 임지단이 샤시도가 저자한테 인지식 the emotions are the city dang ayusam kiti ta chambo jilya jita chapde asmado ko shib sago gan page chikor dangme sorchi chasaga da gali ji ada emotions are the shib sago chani da nga jitin ko luri any 조선 다 심중고 주서지 아니 심중고 주서지 디디도 14호지 봐 가소래 로종 지역에 있나 된된다 심중고 주서지 나네 리카리 리디 이모션 척도가 야 리카리 리디 야 이모션 척이 예미 되디 임지다면로 섬기
So the reason why I was I felt it was important is that partly in given that the mind science is quite a new field in contemporary science, perhaps there is still a lot of scope and room for development of and refinement of the constructs, of the concepts. So because, for example, the word emotion is quite used liberally, and because we use the word emotion liberally, people seem to get the idea of some kind of monolithic sort of world, which is called emotion, and everything is lumped in there. Whereas if you look at the Buddhist approach to understanding the mechanics of the mind, if you want, for example, in Abhidharma psychology, there is a whole classification of known as mental factors. These are the modalities functionally defined in ways in which the mind engages with the world. So there, for example, in one of the influential Abhidharma system, there's a list of 51 such mental factors. And within these mental factors, if you look at them, they are not only clearly defined, but their functions are identified. Their interrelationship with other mental factors are identified. Their behavioral expressions are identified. So there is a much more systematic approach, whereas if you compare that to the Western mind science, there doesn't seem to be a comparable systematic approach. So my hope was that when creating emotional atlas or emotion map, then we will be able to get using the contemporary psychology scientific language to fine-tune and come up with more differentiated way of understanding the human mind. And one of the interests that I have is for someone or a group of people to look at the Abhidharma list, 51 factors, and try to really do a research and tease out to see, by using Western terminology and classification like emotion, to see how many of those 51 can be put in the emotion camp and how many of them will not belong to that category. So those are work that could be interesting, that needs to be done.
Thank you.
죄송합니다.
Wonderful.
심심중 대수과디 어떤 거 저 나로래 가다 줄 다 렉처래야 시라요리 다 ngomba zu jiung gu chane ene chi ngeta kwa sidi yuri nindu hundu chana o baksa ngoju chigda che sa de zu chade ene hunbu renshi xi renshi chu yi nang du geji da nubu du shi deng du ye baksa da ne geji wo sene lo yin yi gu sung xiao de zu chade ene kyaba ma chung sene lo ya re di lob tu gu re karas lo na da chawa yao shu shi ga da ene tin이 시신 사무 지그run되는 공공일이 교의 내버 도준되는 산자신 세계 tuk수 취미주 세네 디디 에디 마명순이 내ren 인연的에디 초절랑보다지 내ren 초용로서부터 저기 간다 대권한이 민야 다요정사의 투를 못주니 에네 방সম신의 대개도 마오 세네 빼야오르샤 그 리뷰 잡아채네 간다로 지 숨부리 삼지 미치에 개발쳐버리 숭셔베네 켜봐마중 생아주 딜러고르보다
So talking about Abhidharma's sophisticated taxonomy of the human mind, one of the key texts in Abhidharma is Vasubandhu's Treasury of Knowledge, Abhidharma Kosha, which is very important in the Tibetan tradition. So it's a very rich resource. But having said that, there are also aspects of Abhidharma which His Holiness was saying that he, for one, do not take seriously. For example, the whole section on Buddhist cosmology in Abhidharma, where he gives a detailed calculations of the distance between the planets and so on and so forth. And so if these are cited, His Holiness will say, there is no logical entailment here. And here, actually, someone like Vasubandhu and others, they were great masters. But just because they're great masters doesn't mean that everything they have stated needs to be taken at their literary true. For example, Chandrakirti, in his Entering the Middle Way, talks about how the truth of emptiness and real understanding of emptiness is so profound. It's also quite terrifying because what is being asked for is to develop a view of the reality where there is no basis for any kind of objectification or grasping. So one is asked to be at home with a view of the world where only thing that you can really talk about is the relationship, interdependence and dependent origination, and just pure designations and concepts and constructs. So, and then in one section of the text, Chandrakirti goes on to say that, great masters like Vasubandhu and Dignath, the great logician, and Dharmapala, they were great masters, highly learned, well-read, but they haven't realized the truth of emptiness. So Chandrakirti is right, So there are aspects of the Buddhist text, although they may be rich in the taxonomy of the mind section, but then other aspects, areas of the text needs to be treated in a different way.
Yeah, thank you. That's a helpful reminder.
자상아 진짜 인도사는 가서 벽이라마 된디게 송셔버다 더 롱된절이야 내 차보마 좀 써야지 뽑아 첨부터는 러토래.
So this is Chandrakirti's text, Entering the Middle Way, and particularly his auto-commentary, which is a lengthy prose text, is something that I actually read on a daily basis, portions of it. And so it gives me some confidence to also reject the literal truth of statements, including from the sutras as well.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Your Holiness, we're sensitive to the time, and if we can, we'd like to ask two more questions. One is, one of the ways that scientists study emotion today is to take advantage of the fact that we all have these phones that we carry around. And scientists have texted people and asked them many times a day for many days, how are you feeling right now, right at this moment? And they report the emotions that they're feeling. And so the question that we have for you, Your Holiness, is what are the emotions that predominate, that are more frequent in a person who exhibits genuine happiness? And a related question is, Your Holiness, if you might, can you talk about what emotions you experience yourself on a daily basis, mostly? What are the most common emotions?
그래서
다들 군주 체리보조 등산 심주 제백갑을 야다 라도 카바 여러와 라도 카바톨 라도 카바 라바케야 카바 여러 다 라바케야 카바톨이야 미수술이야 두주응에멜이야 아니 게지티제 단다 결혼 용조 간대 연구도 샘기베 내가 임바 마기베 내가 임바 콘도사베 내가 임바 게지티제 디치두가라 아니 디네 초돔 데게요레스 인자다 딘레그 리서치에 탑람 여베 인자 정rum제기 뭐네 간다 닝지 제드ön 진야다 샹라 제와다 참바다 딘데 제드ön 진예게 미디기 니리니리 미제 나로야 명초그리디 슈체 간데로 연구구요나스 캡체르지 근데 정rum제 샤샤베나 니리니리 미제 나로 가자 니리니리 냠뇨 나로야 이제 명초그리디 지 캡체어르지 가르용 연구요나스
세브시모스 것을 가
니리 간다디 참바다 닝지다 디게 제드ön 진예 저어봐 제드ön 진예 냠년 진예지 다 디게 니먼지게 미지 나로야 쿠랑의 용소 대세 잡이나 지 이모션데 슉체쇼르비 망쇼르비 간다 연구요나스 리그럽데
저와디 아주 마이 냐리야 예베 그도네 아메 삼로데 도시 시디주베이나 냐리와 부구디 랩 직속인 티유서시 아마 즉 샘제시부시 롱랑 스타샤베이나 디야 쇼긴 티유서시 디데 인디산에 가다 마이 냐리 예베 그도네 송지기 베니 제마타리야 마이 세베 다 짱데버디 세브샤르와 사진에 인도산에 간주 미치 고초야 돼도 세니 간다 다 요문쟁기 저어다 레디네 간다 세베 도 스당 아주 미스코라 고초야 돼 아메 딱제 가서다 따종시야지다 디체니 타마 시외 그돌이야 에네 소수 녀고리야 지 저거 여댕에게 족부된 적이 두스 거다나 지금 시디 용돼야지. 제 안다 지금 소수 시베 그돌이야 칠이야 다도 독선시잖아. 다 저러 미디 시소나 그 규자라디디 이니 그래서 고시게 보이나 서서로 변된데 터네 거대이네 시계 거래 다 원하잖아. 그 시계래 다 규자라 이렇게 판도 그게 매도 현세들이 이네 지금 뭐지 용돼야지. 지금 le don 되게한테 시번의 시지 뭐네 줌시시 전에 샤사셔도 스텝이나 정년디 심 시디 파프 기우야지 저는 인도전에 미미스 고츠베 그도네 타마베 가서 그래 네 치워 요메 그도 순절이야 간다 자와서야 돼 시우지 개셔 버려셔 디초에 계시게 말이 그 정신 현지기 나라도 지속 다 심지 차들잖아요. 그 제도 다 거대지기 사초에 캐라네리 캐마라네리 겨우시 계시게 요 말이 간다 제 레줌제 계시게 말이 간다 소소 뭐냐라 카유라요기 아니 심로 시디야다 기부야려 자와서도 캐셔 보이지 현지라야 저거 요모리야 소수면에 현이야 저거잖아 현기수 저거디 정수 용돼야지 소수면에 배 공주세에 대비는 주 저거 재생이 또 가오로 보다
So the one basic fact is really, once again, it has to do with our social nature. When we're talking about dominance of emotions in our life, we know from some scientific studies that the state of mother's mind has an impact on the unborn child. So the impact of others' affection or emotion or state of mind on, becomes crucial right from a very early stage. And we know, for example, when the child is born, the first few months or years, nurturing relationship really lays the foundation for the emotional life of the child. So there, and from there, it really establishes the basis for the role of compassion, the role of love in our life. And so not only at the beginning of our birth, but also in middle life, as well as towards the end of our life, the role of compassion and love and affection remains very powerful. And we know that, for example, when we are the recipient of someone's affection, they are loving people around us, we feel more at ease, we feel more assured, we feel rested, secure. So, and then we know that even from, for example, if a loving person a loved one is dying, and the loved one is surrounded by truly loved ones who genuinely love this person, the dying person is able to let go and pass this life more easily, at ease. On the other hand, if this is a person who hasn't been that nice towards others, and then at the time of death, maybe there are family members who are fighting about the inheritance and sort of with each other, and imagine the impact this will have on the mind of this dying person. So even when we are dying, others' affection, others' love matters to us. So that is really the foundation of our emotional life as a social creature. So therefore, making that emphasis and creating that kind of experience of affection, receiving affection, giving affection in our life is really the way to build a good, rich emotional, constructive emotional life. So this is when, on this point, there is no difference at all between religion and no religion, different religions. It's really, we are talking about the fundamental human condition, the facts of human reality, facts of human existence.
그도리야 기행 진전하려 기행이 루주솔이야 뭐네지 베스심다 샤사 여러서 두스 루트셔디 부구성을 맞배지 수대야지 에리 기행이 예다던 게 세어게 배우세 드드셔이다 지gnang 것하는 롭종 시셔서지 심그 띵네 당도게 야말와 땐데 쳐도 저서리 시부지 개심으로셔.
So even in a classroom, when a formal subject is being taught, if the teacher shows kindness and a genuine sense of concern for the child's education, and the children feel secure in that classroom, the lesson they learn goes deeper. They actually pay attention. Whereas if the teacher may be knowledge-wise very competent, but if the teacher is not bringing human affection in the classroom and do not make that connection with the students, and then instead, it creates a kind of a fearful atmosphere in the classroom, then this fearful state of mind prevents children from actually learning. So this is, something that we can see from our own personal experience.
시스템 남주스탠드베이나 부구수 진절 소두산에 베 가신 쪼신도야지 다 기게 카사보 아니 샤세 남주사 매베이나 아니 진절 야 부구수 용백도를 다 사르구이버서시 뭐지부시 용다지 저거보다 저거서데 시우지 개심부르샤.
So for example, if there's a teacher who's popular, who's kind and who's gentle and engaging, the children love going to that classroom. Whereas if the teacher is someone who is stern, cold, and in fact short-tempered and loses temper, easily, then children, instead of looking forward to going to the classroom, the moment they have to go to that class, they feel as if the sun has set. so that's a very natural human, attitude and response.
Yeah, there's actually good scientific research that is very consistent with this, Your Holiness. So this is really a wonderful description. Thank you.
One final question, Your Holiness. It's along these lines. If we're social animals and if warmth and warm-heartedness is so important, and if there's 7 billion people on the planet, given the oneness of humanity, how can we make the leap from loving people we care about and know to loving everyone?
세우시면서
드샤 단디 잠불린 디가리아 단디 짱구름 제게 나주 draw me 디게 지속 심제레 스칸난 거와 social animal 딘자다 지속 심제네야 고코 디자와 캐치 부이 맞간난 게 되가라 땅 안줄이야 수수 녀녀도 당 수수 가살에 제와 체데 랑체스 요르와 요르디네 짱구름 제 draw me 단디 통규 든주 탐바디 draw me 직규 그간난 되가라 디 제로디 draw me 창말이야 캡토야게 탑람버지 간대요 나스
다 대안데 나랑서 랑체수 저와디 예베체 다 데리야 시럽게 좋아체니 저와디 자치로 동하지 용토야 되고 다 대안데 시럽 가르쳐 줘서는 나도 전부는 디가라 다 미통주 드주스 예데베디 다 냠도 대고 열어 저자가 네 점니 샤르조 기 마음벤 드름 리아 딱하다 점니 샤르조 기 케벤 누초고를 땡데버 누초 뜻이 샤르조 땡데게 점니 화상 뜻이다 땡니 간다 아주 미다 통주 등주 거지 예데베디 이제 3월로 간다 제가 학벌도 드리게서 뒤줄을 너무도 저기 말에 너무 소소소 지 계급 소소소 계급 춘주를 시제 아니 디난게 다 가다지 대로 춘주주 간데 간주 스타지 다 드리게서 뒤줄데 간주 스드잖아 전문이 디간이야 여등에 밑삼월로리야 곡 투야시도가 라 저들이 인도산에 가다 밑삼월 직주인 것이다 아니 참을로다 가다 아주 human brothers sisters 즉 디토안에도 세워치 공의네술이야 다 가다 아주 미통주 등주수제를 디디 간다 찍찍이야 땡니 대과지 다 의네술 봐 사들이 인도 점불링 대강 미삼월로 oneness of human brothers sisters 네디셰디요래 디차와 쉬우시도 그러나 가샤샤나 그러나 가르샤샤네 시 세미나리아 미참월로 아니 동해면도보다 대원도 미치규리 삼바시 삼로 디케니 윤디 루모 드라멘들리 지지소 드라멘라 지기 다가는 신기지 다 가소르 베게 리주 드라멘데 데 카와토이네 미치규인 삼바시 내가 감게요래 술에 정식이 감게니 용되기도 봐. 사당에디 나도 에시아리 샤르고리 에네 방도 배워리 직선이 데 미난자 염지스탄도스 치베이나 미투베 그돌이야 지금 독보쳐 대야서로 지금 도스 박선으로 적어왔으면 차베이나 그 찍찍 써 용도금도 봐. 그래서 미치규근 도시디 샤인데 써와들 라라버실리기도 봐.
So here the important thing is, as we spoke about earlier, the compassion is a natural human quality. This is something that we are biologically given. So the ability to have a sense of concern for others' well-being is there as a part of our natural inheritance. And yes, you're right. Generally, we tend to reserve it for a small circle of people. But here, when we are trying to expand the scope of this natural compassion, we need the aid of wisdom. And so here, by wisdom, what I mean is to really use our rational thinking. For example, understanding, first of all, that just like myself, everybody on this earth wishes to be happy, do not want suffering. And furthermore, to really appreciate that, in this today's reality, the welfare and the interest of everybody is so intertwined. There is no longer a real basis for making hard differentiations of East versus West or South versus North. So the whole world is so interconnected and interdependent. So if we are serious about our own welfare and our own community's well-being, we need to take serious concern about the well-being of others. So this deep interconnectedness of today's reality is something that needs to be brought by understanding and wisdom. And also to appreciate that in the past, situation may have been different because countries and small tribes and communities may have been able to remain autonomous. So in those kind of situations, maybe there is a case to be made for not caring about what goes beyond your border. But in today's world, those kind of situations have completely changed. So this, I think, is an important point. And furthermore, from our own personal, from one's own personal well-being, the moment you are able to connect with someone at the basic human level, a shared human level, the awareness that just like myself, this person too wishes to be happy, do not want suffering. If we bring that awareness, then it really opens up a much more easy way of interacting with everybody. So in my own personal case, I had the privilege to travel extensively. And whenever I'm in a different place, different ethnic groups, different communities, different cultures, different languages, different religions, but I always relate first and foremost at the fundamental human level. I know at that level, on that level, just as myself, this person in front of me wishes to be happy, do not want suffering. So if I'm able to relate at that level, there is a sense of ease. There is a naturalness, and I can bring my best and bring the compassionate heart in that interaction. And the expression comes out in the form of a smiling, and humans smile towards other smiling human beings. That's a sort of a natural human response. Whereas if I emphasize what makes me different, that I'm an Asian, I'm a Tibetan, then I'm a Buddhist. If you make those kind of differentiations and prioritize this, then when you are in a different situation where you're interacting with people from different background, then your immediate attitude and sort of emotional response may be that of caution, vigilance, even suspicion. So then it prevents from your natural human compassion to come out. So I think just using this kind of reasoning, this wisdom, there's clearly, there is a basis where the natural compassion can then be expanded to include, so that when we begin to use the word we, that we will cover everybody on this earth. That we, so our sense of we and us really should cover the entire 7 billion human beings.
And I often sort of mentioning the spirit of European Union, particularly German, French, and First World War, Second World War, arch enemy. Then, under the leadership of Adenauer and de Gaulle, the French and German, they initiated the, develop European Union. So, in the past several centuries, killing each other, fighting. Now, since the European Union developed or established, then at least all the members of European Union never kill each other. So I think United Nations also actually is that kind of sort of what's the view, or that kind of hoping. So now today, whole world is, as I mentioned earlier, east, west, north, south, all have to live together. So we should keep oneness of human being of this planet. We have to live together. So no longer fight each other. Senseless. So you see, no need weapon, no need military forces. Occasionally, some sort of disagreement. Then through dialogue, you see, try to solve, not through weapon. So, thinking this line, you can really develop peaceful world, a demilitarized world. That should be our aim. And including great scientists, now you should teach other people. Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Your Holiness. This was very beautiful, very profound, very helpful. On behalf of everyone, we want to thank you for taking the time.
Thank you.
And for
Thank you
your
so
wisdom.
much, Your Holiness.
That's
And
all.
Your Holiness, I wanted to mention to you that we are in day 36 following the Tukdam case in Drepung of this Geshe. And we are having a combined team of our scientists from our center and the Russian scientists all working together and following this case. And today was day 36 of this Tukdam.
Thank you.
Amazing.
So, thank you.
Susan.
Thank
Yeah,
you so much,
deep-
Your
deep
Holiness.
Deep gratitude, Your Holiness. We are really enjoyed being with you again. And until next time, we want you to stay healthy and well. And we look forward to our next time together. Thank you to Richie and to Dan and to Jimpala and to all of the guests that are here watching the session. It was really wonderful to be with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You know,
I want to ask the brain specialist how much connection, peace of mind, and affect brain through that way, healthy physical. I think peace of mind, some connection with healthy body, isn't it?
Yes, very close connection, Your Holiness.
Right?
Very close connection. Yes.
At least, you see, as a practitioner of compassion, on my face always smile. Thank you.
okay, thank you.
Bye-bye.